Okay, looks like we're live here. So I'd like to thank everybody for joining today. My name is Brian Dever. I am the sales manager for our Pro AV and collaboration team. Today we are going through one of our webcasts on conference rooms, a build out for success. The intention today is to just give you a brief walkthrough of, kind of qualifying questions to talk to an end user about, identify the proper solution for them, and really just kind of give you a good background of knowledge and potential pitfalls and things to watch out for when you are speccing a solution for one of your customers. Today we are joined by Brian Dunot, who is a product specialist over at Neat. Neat is one of our new collaboration vendors that has a great bundle of solutions in this space. We also have Kirsten Gorham, who is our senior sales specialist at D&H here. She covers Samsung Display. And yeah, so if you guys want to say hi.
Hello.
Sure.
Alrighty. All right, so I want to have this to kind of be kind of a conversational walkthrough between the three of us here. And if anybody has any questions, feel free to throw them in the Q&A spot. If they are pertinent to the current topic that we're on, I'll try and stop and address them. If not, we will go through any of the pending questions at the end of the segment here. So Brian, obviously you have a lot of experience in this set. What we want to do is just kind of, pretend we're having a conversation about, what you see from some of your end users and things like that. So what are some of the common reasons you hear from customers as to why they're considering upgrading their AV or unified communications type equipment?
It seems like right now, a couple of big trends that we're seeing is, during the last few years, maybe they went out and bought a meeting platform. And then now as different contracts are coming up, they're planning to do a move. So maybe it's a WebEx to Microsoft Teams or Zoom to Microsoft Teams or Microsoft Teams to Zoom. And they don't have the conferencing hardware in their meeting space to support that. So that's one of them. The second thing is for those that remained in the office and didn't go to kind of the work from home, I think we all saw this happen. It was kind of just a mad rush to get their hands on whatever they could. And, Brian, you and I talked about it too, right? Like some organizations were just buying PTZ cameras because that's the only thing that was in stock, plugging it in, and really not doing a good job in their meeting spaces. And what that's leaving, the end result is that it's not a very good solution as people are starting to come back in or they're really adopting that hybrid work. Because like you and I, we're up close and personal on the camera, along with Kirsten. You go into a conference room and all of a sudden now you have a webcam view of a 35-foot long conference room. It's not a good experience. So they really want to kind of bring that meeting equity back into those meeting spaces. And that's driving a lot of those conversations that we're seeing from not only our customers, but also the partners that we work with.
Cool. What are some of these main qualifying questions that we need to get in front of our end users when we're having discussions about speccing out a new solution to really meet their needs that you feel is super important to make sure we get to the right answer for their actual use case?
Sure. So I think, when I think about kind of prior roles that I've had and even here at Need is really trying to understand what all is happening within the meeting space itself. So what I mean by that is, what are they doing for a phone system, right? A lot of times we forget to ask that question, and the phone is just as important in the meeting space as it is to provide video, right? So we have customers who are, hey, we're going to Zoom phone and we've got, Zoom video and Zoom meetings. So could we consolidate devices and simplify that end user experience, right? Because it's always kind of cumbersome to walk in and you're like, well, there's a spider phone on the desk. There's a touch panel for the conference room. There's cameras on the wall. There's displays on the wall. That trying to understand what all is going on is huge. The second thing that I really like to understand is what are their major pain points? What are they struggling with within that meeting space? And what are they looking to achieve by making this investment? Because at the end of the day, if they're going to spend money on it, we need to understand what are their expectations when they deploy a device in that room. What are they walking away from, and are they going to be happy with what investment they've made? So I think those are a couple of the big things that we certainly want to consider when we're talking about that. Then there's always the environmental piece, and I think that um, one of the things that we like here at Neat and that we're proud of is like we have sensors in our devices, right? So we can do temperature, humidity, VOC, CO2 level. Those are some of the things that actually we have customers that are asking about, like, hey, we need to have visibility into the room as people are coming in because we don't have full IT staffs at every site. And those environmental things, I would say, for Kirsten, that probably pertains to her as well when we think about other environmental things like windows in the room.
Absolutely. So that's a good point to make. Most conference rooms are going to have some type of windows, an external light source, and obviously we want to make sure that the display is bright enough that it can be seen during the daytime. So, if you're going in to the site to do like a survey and it's after hours, obviously maybe the shades are going to be down or the sun's not even going to be out anymore. So those are all good points to take into consideration. And all of our display vendors have high bright displays. So if you are having a lot of external light, we definitely can make sure that we get the right brightness display in there. Because if you've watched TV with your living room window open, you don't like the shadow that it will leave. So you don't want that in a conference room or a meeting for the experience as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's incredibly important as part of the experience to make sure that everybody feels a part of the meeting, whether they're in there in person or virtually outside. It can be incredibly distracting or isolating if you don't feel like you are being able to be involved or consulted with, no matter which way you're at. And if people can't see you, right, then the displays are worthless. I think that was a really incredible point to bring up is doing these site surveys when there's the expectation of when that business is going to be utilizing that room, because otherwise you could have a 3 o'clock sun situation which completely blinds every panel in there, and if you're only in there after hours, it looks great at 7 o'clock at night when you finish your install. So that's absolutely important.
And Brian, just
so Brian,
one other
go ahead.
One other point I was just going to make real quick on that too, in addition to the environmental, is how is the room going to be used? And that's another key point that I think is real critical to make sure that we understand is what's the furniture layout? Is it going to be movable furniture? Is it going to be stationary furniture? Are you going to have presenters? Is it just going to be a traditional meeting space? Is it more of a presenter to an audience? Like, you really need to understand the dynamics of that room, because all the hardware manufacturers that are out there are going to have solutions, whether we fix devices to a wall, we put something on a mobile cart so that we're flexible as the as the room changes. We need to be able to adapt to the changes in those furniture. So those are a couple other things that I would just say I think are really important to understand before we even sit down and start throwing out, hey, we're putting 3 displays and we're putting this camera or this mic or this solution in there. These are all things that I think we really need to ask those customers before we start.
Great. Are there, Brian, in your experience, are there any other technology, things that people should take a look at before they're designing the room, that they should understand whether or not they're going to be integrating with different systems or, complementary verticals or, technology segments that are in there that you think are incredibly important to have a conversation with that before, to make sure that we're not only designing for now, but maybe the future of that customer and where they want to be, a year or two down the road from a technology sense.
Yeah, and so a couple of things on that. First, I would say content sharing, and the reason why I say content sharing is when the room's not in use in a meeting, a lot of times people are still going to go in there if they're having an in-person meeting and understanding what do they need to do. Do they just need to share content on a screen so they can collaborate on something? If so, how are they going to do that? Is there already existing technology in the room that we want to use? We also want to know from an audio and speaker solution as well, right? Some customers have invested in large DSPs, ceiling mics, ceiling speakers, things like that. Those are things where we need to kind of understand, like, do we need to integrate with them? And that's kind of, I would go back to that first question, which is like, is that a pain point or is that working for you? I mean, because at the end of the day, the more we integrate, the more complex we can make those rooms. And if we can simplify the complexity, that might be a better solution, right? So again, trying to kind of understand that. And then the third piece of that too is, what's the expectations around whiteboarding? And I say that because when we think about designing rooms, right, if you're going to have an interactive panel in the room, number one, where do you want it? Number two, are you making sure that there's adequate space for those people to kind of move around that whiteboard to be able to, annotate on it and still be seen on the video? But also that plays a point as well, because then when you're out of the room, what are the expectations of that board, right? We all know that when we have kind of the old analog dry erase boards, it's somebody goes into a meeting space. We don't have a meeting. It's just in person. You write up on it. Somebody takes a picture with their iPhone, blasts it out to everybody. It's kind of how it works, right? I mean, it's what we've all adopted. Now, when you're introducing digital whiteboards, that's a whole new ballgame, right? Because you're going to try to take a picture of a digital whiteboard, probably not going to work so well. You can leverage the integrated capabilities there to just email it when you're done. But also then, like, how do I continue working on that when I get back to my desk, right? And those are things that I think you can really be a value add when you understand the capabilities of the platforms that your customers are going to work with, whether it's Teams or Zoom or WebEx, for example. When you understand, like, what is that workflow, and you're speccing out that solution and then can talk to it and say, hey, you know what? If you want to use a neat board, for example, you do the annotations, you can email it, or you could even, if it's Teams, it's in their whiteboard app, go back to your desk, pull it up, and you can continue annotating on it. So I think that also helps, because you have to help your customer move from what they're used to. Let's face it, we all hate change. You're going to change their workflow, which was the analog whiteboard and the iPhone, to a digital experience. Well, we need to be able to help them understand, like, how does that translate? What is the new workflow? And I think those are important things to kind of talk through with the customer.
Yeah, I think the point about understanding what is going to happen in that room when they're not being utilized, for the designed intended purpose, is definitely an important consideration to make for the long-term happiness of the customer with the solution that you provide them. Because you're absolutely right. I can't tell you how many times I've jumped into a meeting room and tried to use, a whiteboard or a display that was set up for video conferencing only to find out that there's no way to connect into it. I can't do an ad hoc projection, a presentation in there. Obviously, projectors aren't, generally speaking, in a lot of these small and medium-sized huddle spaces anymore. So it is incredibly important to kind of expand the capabilities of that room and just, utilize the technology as it is, right? I mean, these are important considerations to make when we're doing with these. So yeah.
And I would even say, Brian, like, how many times, and this is again why it's so important to talk through that, when you don't explain how that works, to your point that you just made, what ends up happening? The Johnny IT guy who's in the meeting goes in there and they start disconnecting things, right? And plugging in their laptop. And they're like, oh, hey, cool. Now I figured out how to locally share content. Great. When Johnny IT guy leaves, he leaves all the cables disconnected. So the next person who comes in and goes to click to start to join the meeting, nothing works. And then it's a call to IT, and then there's headaches. And then ultimately, usually that blame comes back to you as the partner who's done the install, because it's like, why? It doesn't work. Like you said, this was going to be really easy. So definitely got to think about that end user experience, that adoption, that training as part of this.
Yeah, you definitely you got to kid-proof it. As a father of a 10-year-old who thinks he knows how to connect in his PlayStation into my home theater system, you absolutely do need to vet and play out the kid-proofing scenarios, right? Because you're absolutely right. The president of the company that you install this isn't going to understand that Bob from accounting knew what an HDMI cable was because he worked at Best Buy back in 2003, and now your system doesn't work. Because he unplugged the thing behind it. Yeah, so there, that's absolutely right. So you definitely gotta make it easy, make it multi-use, and make it so anybody can kind of understand how to go back into it. So Brian, I mean, obviously, when we're talking about kind of coming off this initial wave of hybrid solutions where people were just kind of putting together everything just to make it work when we weren't all expecting to be out of the office for 2 years. I mean, what are you finding that some of your customers are struggling with those initial deployments and are trying to rectify with a second pass at some of these rooms and solutions that they're building now?
So I think, it kind of goes back to that first point that we said. They really tried to just grab whatever they could get their hands on and deploy it. And they weren't really focused on the end user experience. They were more focused on delivering video to connect remote workers, in those rooms. Now what we're seeing too is like price is becoming a factor, right? So people are like, how do I deploy this to all the rooms? Well, there's a cost factor to that, right? Complexity. It's like, well, do we have all the components that we need, or are we better off going to like an all-in-one type solution, right? And as we start talking through that, then it starts coming into, you also get some of the IT requests, which is like, I need to be able to manage these devices. I want it to be simple to deploy. Like, again, if we're scaling, it's a lot of organizations, unfortunately, have gone through cuts, and the end result of that is, instead of having an AV team that might have been 3 or 4 people, might be just one person, and they're kind of tasked with doing this. So they need a solution that isn't going to be complex, isn't going to require a lot of babysitting, something that they can easily deploy. They know that their end users are going to be familiar with it. And what we're seeing more of a trend in is not so much the systems where they're interoperable, and kind of the BYOD type approach where bring my laptop, plug in a bunch of cables, and then it just works. They're used to either Zoom or Teams as that meeting platform. They're looking for that same user interface, those same controls in the in-room system. And that's where I would say I think you're starting to see more emphasis on, these are Zoom certified devices, these are Teams certified devices, etc. Right? Because again, end user, I don't need to deploy a wiring diagram to be like, hey, bring your laptop in. Here's the 47 cables you need to plug in, and then go into your system settings, change all these settings, and then start your meeting. Nobody's going to do that. They literally want to walk in and either click join or have the intelligence built into their meeting platform software running on their laptop or their mobile device that could say like, hey, guess what? There's an MTR system or there's a Zoom room system here. Let me just click connect, and then boom, all of a sudden the call joins from that in-room meeting system. And I think that's where we're really starting to see, we rushed, we delivered video, but it's not the experience we wanted. We need to simplify it. We need to make sure that everybody's present within that meeting space. And I think that's another critical component, right? Is people want that equitable meeting experience when they return to the room. They want to see everybody that's there, because for those 2 to 3 people that are joining the meeting remote, they don't want to feel like kind of the distant relative, right? They want to feel like they're part of it. They want to see when Kirsten's having that sidebar conversation with one of her colleagues, they want to see that like, maybe there's something else more important we need to discuss as a team, because obviously they're talking about something, right? And if you're just focused on active speaker tracking, or, you have it preset on, Brian, just you, and your son sit next to you, right? We might want to see what your son's doing with the PlayStation and the home entertainment system. Can't do that if we're just focused in on you. So seeing everybody is real important as well. And that's another, I would say, driving force as to some of the considerations being made.
Yeah, I think the time of the executive meeting room full of spaghetti cables across the top of VGA and all that stuff is definitely over. And the last 2 years of us being kind of forced into adopting this hybrid environment has actually really probably matured this segment a lot faster than it would have naturally. I mean, everybody knows Zoom and Teams and all that stuff now, and we're all very comfortable now, hopefully, joining these programs and these platforms that line at home. And I think you're absolutely right. As we start to move back into the office in a more hybrid environment, people want that same experience, right? They understand how they do it on their laptop 7 times a day for 8 hours. But, you know, if they go into a room and you know, they need to be able to figure that out there too, right? Or otherwise you have the worst thing you could see as an AV system designer is somebody sitting in a meeting room across from a camera and a panel doing a meeting on their laptop, you know, with the tiny integrated screen, because they just couldn't figure it out. And I think that is the, you know, the absolute thing that we're trying to avoid here is you're right. You want to make it simple. You want, you know, your mom to be able to walk in there and hit join the meeting, or you know, and just start talking like they're sitting across from a person that showed up in there. And I think that's going to be incredibly important as we start to really embrace this hybrid environment that we've come to know, and some people love, some people not, but it's definitely not going away. More and more companies are getting into it, and I think, you know, it's just, you know, to see the maturation of this segment is going to be a nice thing to ride through. We'll get more and more requests from customers and end users on how to properly roll these things out. And I think it's incredibly important for us to understand a lot of the lessons that have been learned over the last 2 years here. So.
Yeah, I think it's a great analogy. Oh, sorry. I was going to say, I think a great analogy is, you know, when you're 16, you'll take any car that will get you from point A to point B. And that's what we've done for the last 2 years. And now we're like, okay, I want the bells and whistles. I want to know, hey, I can't walk into this room because someone's about to come into it. So, you know, I want the room scheduler outside, and I want to walk in and hit a button. I don't want to have to call 12 people to figure out how to get my laptop to show. And each customer has their own bells and whistles. So learning what those bells and whistles are, you know, then lean on, you know, us as a partner to, you know, direct you to, you know, what will get you those bells and whistles. I think that is super important when you're talking to them and trying to understand what they are expecting from spaces.
Yeah, I think you brought up an excellent point. Those room schedulers, generally speaking, are one of the least thought of, I think, accessories that are probably one of the most important for a room success, is to be able to, you know, reserve a room in Outlook and understand that, hey, you know, at 3 o'clock, my room is there, it's ready, and I'm going to walk in here and push these buttons. You know, it definitely is an experiential thing, and, you know, there you go, perfect, right?
Yeah.
So.
Yep, just having that visibility, and I think that's a great point as well. Especially now, people are going back to different spaces, right? We're not going back to, you know, a lot of large enterprise customers we're dealing with. They're cutting their floor plan like in halves or cutting it down to a third. So there's no dedicated meetings. You know, there's not dedicated offices, dedicated desks like we used to. So those wayfinding and those room scheduling solutions are even more important, because you're walking in and going, I don't know this place. This used to be home, but it doesn't feel like home now. Where can I go to work? And having those types of solutions where you can walk up is huge.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you know, nobody wants to intrude on somebody else's meeting, and, you know, just the ability to know that you have that space when you're in those things, you have your dedicated huddle space is key. And again, it's all about the user experience. Again, you don't want to have to teach everybody to become an IT genius in order to start their video chat. You want them to be able to look at it. Yes, I'm in the right place. My name's on the wall. I'm going to go in there. I'm going to hit the start meeting button, and it knows that I had this room and what my team's you know, meeting was, and everything works out great. So yeah, I mean, I think, you know, simplifying that experience is probably key. Again, not everybody at your end user is going to learn and live and love this stuff that we do. So, you know, to make it easy for them to just push through is definitely going to help their happiness and understanding, you know, that they got what they paid for, and that they are, you know, building that experience of being able to bring their people together and collaborate efficiently in the way that they want. So what do you think, you know, as far as the future of BYOD? Obviously, you know, we are in a hybrid environment. People have their own laptops. They're coming into the office. They have their own devices that they're used to utilizing at home. I mean, how does that play into some of these system designs when you have for example, like an executive boardroom where you got to think through about multiple people possibly having to present and share different data and from different sources?
So I think I'm going to take that in twofold. So one is when we think about like the content sharing, right? I think that's a separate conversation when I think of Zoom and meeting. Microsoft Teams, right? Because they both have their technologies built in for you to do content sharing into a Zoom or a Teams meeting, which also means if you have a dedicated Zoom or Teams meeting running there, then basically to be able to share, it's, you walk in, you have the Zoom client, the Teams client, you either cast or you share from that. And now we don't need those other third-party tools. And I'm not saying that they don't have their purpose. I'm just saying when we think of simplifying that end user experience, my philosophy has always been to reduce the amount of points of failure that you can put in a room. And the minute we start adding more things to those rooms, the room design and the end user experience can become more complex, right? Because now if I have another solution for sharing content, it's another solution I have to train end users on. So having that, I think, is really important, is making sure that like you understand the full capabilities of, let's say, Zoom or Teams or WebEx. I think that's important. Now, when we get into BYOD, yes, it's there. And actually, I'm using a neat device in USB mode right now to talk to you guys, right? If I unplug it from my laptop, it's going to revert back to a Teams room experience, and we can do that. And that's great for some of the smaller huddle rooms, but when we get into the larger rooms, Ryan, to your point, a lot of people have laptops, but there's a lot of differences in the laptops, right? You got HDMI ports, you got display ports, you've got USB-C, you've got USB-A, you've got all these different ports, all these different laptops that now you have to factor in, will those work in those rooms? And then that gets you away from that native experience, which when you get away from it and it's BYOD, it means more setup time. And, there's always that old joke that it takes 10 minutes to get a meeting started. I think when you're talking about BYOD, that's very true, because you have to walk in and make sure that like, okay, cables are still there, because we all know how quickly those walk away in meeting spaces. Are the cables there? Connect it. Does my platform of choice see that device? Yes. Let me do a quick mic check. Let me do a quick video check. Okay, great. Now people are coming in and talking to you. You're getting distracted. And then it's like, oh shoot, hold on. Let me join because we got remote participants, and I click join. And then now I've joined, but it's several minutes into the meeting. Whereas when we have that native experience, be it Teams, Zoom, WebEx, for example, I walk in, I just click join, and I'm connected. What we've actually seen, because these price points of a lot of these all-in-one solutions has come so far down, when you have a very dominant meeting platform, Zoom or Teams, build a room around that native platform. And then maybe you have one room that's kind of designated as that alternative meeting platform, right? Maybe you have a customer, you have a client that's a Teams only shop, you're a Zoom shop, all your rooms are built to Zoom, but you still need to be able to collaborate. One option would be have that dedicated alternative room, or leverage some of the capabilities that all these platforms are bringing, which is kind of the interop. It's not great, it's not full native experience, right? But if you're using Direct Guest Join from Zoom into Teams, that works. If you're using Direct Guest Join from Teams into Zoom or WebEx, that works. So again, you could run your rooms as native endpoints and then connect in, leveraging those capabilities. Again, might not be full feature rich, but it kind of checks the box, and it avoids you having to have all these extra cables laying around.
Sure, absolutely. So we had a question, but I think it's a good point to bring up, and we haven't really addressed it. Obviously, when we're talking about this entire experience, we're trying the full intention of these rooms are to bring people together that are outside the room and inside the room, and obviously audio is a huge important component of that, and audio design is a component that needs to be thought through a little bit. And, we've all seen those worst case scenarios of those 70s style boardrooms that are 10 feet wide and 45 feet long, and we're going to put 25 people in there and one camera at the one end, right? And if you're on that other end of that and you're virtually participating in that meeting, it can obviously feel a little bit isolating that you're not in the room if it's not designed correctly with the correct audio microphone, camera solutions, and things like that. What do you think are some best practices that people need to vet through, or maybe to set expectations with their customers in order to deliver an experience that is worthy of the investment that they're going to be making into these solutions?
Sure. So, I mean, first off, I would say acoustically, we've got to look at those rooms, right? I mean, I can't tell you how many times I've seen you get these fabulous room designs. And Kirsten and I talked about this before, where it's all windows, it faces west. So from like 2 o'clock to 5 o'clock, it's got all this light coming in. So that's one thing. But when they do that, you get all that sound reverb because there's nothing that's acoustically tuning down that room. So you've got to really consider, like, if you're going into a room and it's concrete floor or wood floor, probably not ideal, right? From an acoustic point of view. All the glass windows, drywalled ceilings, or those real large open ceilings where you've got the concrete, ceiling. See that a lot in kind of some of these older buildings that are being retrofit to become new customer locations. Look at things like some of the acoustic panels and some of the acoustic tiling, right? Even some of those, honestly, putting those on the walls, hanging them from the ceiling, putting them underneath the table, just to absorb some of that reverb and that echo in those rooms can make a big difference. The other piece of that I would say is really look at the hardware manufacturers and what they're touting from a perspective of what their mic coverage is, right? The biggest thing that I see is people will look at, and I'm going to pick on Neat, for example, here. They will look at a bar and say, well, it's $3,000 less than the Bar Pro. I'll just put it in this room that's 45 feet long. Well, that's not where that bar is intended for, right? So it's really important to talk with the hardware manufacturers and understand, or with with your team, and understand what is the ideal room, and then see if you can get a device and test it out in that room, because that's a big thing from an acoustics, right? Because the other thing is some of the products that are out in the marketplace, the camera tracking is based on the acoustics and the audio in the room. So if I turn and I'm talking, and now all of a sudden I'm talking to this 20 foot of open space, the camera might not track me and it'll zoom out, and it'll be a really bad experience for your far end people. So I definitely would recommend for anybody that's looking at that, see if you can get your hands on some of that gear, test it out in there, and see how it reacts to the different acoustics in the rooms. But again, I can't stress enough, like, try to make sure that those rooms are acoustically tuned, and that is, carpeting, sound dampening, the panels, the acoustic panels that you can hang, moving away from drywall and glass on everything. See if you guys could do like a drop ceiling. They have a lot of those drop ceiling tiles that are acoustically like sound dampening, so that you don't get so much of that echo and reverb in the room. So I think that's very, very critical. Yep. Because it's not fair when you go back to the hardware manufacturer and go, we're in a fishbowl and your product is terrible. It sounds terrible. It's like, well, why'd you design a fishbowl and think that you're going to get away with a video or an audio call? I mean, take the video piece out of it, put a speakerphone in the middle of the table, and I guarantee you're going to have the same issue. I mean, you really got to think about the acoustics there.
Yeah, I think everybody has, end users have seen these clip art style of modern offices, which are, like you said, the fishbowl with the glass tile floors and the glass desks, and people holding meetings in there, and then the realistic rooms are nowhere near that, right? So setting the expectations, doing the mic coverage, doing the audio design is a huge component of that experience, because we've all been involved in echoey meetings where you're just like, well, I'm here, but I'm not really, right? And it's not something that you can overject or interject on. So yeah, I think that is huge. And those trials are probably a really good option, right? To do a test in the room, because you can design everything if you want, but until you stick the products in the room, you're not really going to understand exactly what kind of coverage until you have some experience with it from there. Kirsten?
I was going to say about mic coverage, and then also your question, I mean, I would love to talk to you off a line about it, but was it audio from the people that weren't in the meeting, or audio from the people who were in the meeting? Because maybe you need, like we said, not just a sound bar. Maybe you need, something larger in there. And again, all of our partners in the collaboration UC space, they all have kind of a diagram of, this is the room size, this is what we say for something this size, and for the amount of participants that you have in there. So, if you're, holding, a large meeting room and you're only going to have so many people, we got to make sure that we have the right solution for the space and the amount of people that you're looking for.
So Kirsten, obviously, being a product specialist here at D&H, you have a lot of visibility to some of the solutions and projects that we're putting through. What resources do we have available here at D&H that customers can leverage? If they aren't fully comfortable yet with rolling out one of these solutions, they want help of some experts to go into their end user and help build out the correct solution so that they are able to follow all the guidelines and kind of best practices that we're going through today.
Absolutely. So I'll start with the team of other specialists like myself. I've been at D&H for 6 years and on the same vendor for 5.5 of it. So I fully understand, the product lineup and where my solutions fit. Besides that, I'm kind of a direct connection to the vendor. So, come work with our specialists, our vendor specialists, and, you have a direct line to the vendors and the support that they have to offer. Pretty much each of them have some type of, tech support or team that can answer any kind of, incredibly difficult tech questions that you may have. But we also here at D&H have a pro AV architect. So we have some guys that will get on a call. You can pull up blueprints of the room that you're looking at, and they will walk through everything from, the size of the video conferencing system that you need to this is going to be the best wall to put a display on, and this is where, your closet with the rack is going to be to, take care of these items. This is where power is. I've seen them do it. I've seen them do it with you and your end user on the call so that, we're making sure that we're covering all questions that may need to be asked, and we don't have to keep scheduling calls with everyone and, hey, we need these questions this time and come back next time with these questions. So we have a plethora of resources here at D&H to support, whatever vendor you want to talk about and whatever platform you're using. We can help you put those solutions together.
Yeah, so I think, the important thing is, reach out to your sales rep, let them know of the problem that you're looking to help get solved, and we could definitely direct you into the proper resources and leverage all those vendor relationships we have. I mean, obviously as a distributor here, we have relationships with vendors in almost every category, and we're able to reach out to those vendors. And that's really the role of a good distributor. Is the term value added gets thrown around a lot. It generally is a buzzword that doesn't carry a lot of meaning, but in this case, it actually is, right? We are adding value to this relationship. Our existence here isn't just stocking product and shipping it and getting things on site. It is introducing vendors that carry solutions to you that you introduce to your customer. It is truly a channel that we are kind of in the middle of directing here. So, we have a ton of resources that act as overlays to our sales organization. Myself, Kirsten, all of our product specialists of any of the major vendors that are out there. Generally speaking, we have one or multiple people associated with growing that business. If not, we have vendor business managers who are checked in directly with the vendors, guys like Brian, our resources that we have available to you that will certainly be willing and able to come out with you and bring to bear all the resources that their company has. Brian, I know you could talk a little bit about what some of your, field engineers are out there doing and how they're generally interacting with some of these end users to help bring some of these solutions.
Yeah. So, I mean, I would just say from a neat perspective, obviously we have our account managers that will go on site. We also have our C Tribe I program, which is a great advantage. So if you have customers who again are looking for it, well, and it's meets the size requirements, we'll ship them a brand new device. They can get that device. They can get that device there. We have a team here that will actually help make sure that it gets set up correctly so that they can properly evaluate it. And at the end of the 30 days, they can either opt to purchase it or they can return it, no questions asked. So I think that's big. A lot of my teammates here that are on the product specialist team like me, we predominantly do everything remote. And the main reason for that is we want our customers and our partners to hear our devices, right? It's one thing if we go on site and we help you get it set up, but I think one of the big selling points for Neat is how simple our devices are to deploy on site. But that also then gives you the ability that once it's deployed, let's hop on a call, let's have a meeting, and you can experience, really the Neat experience remotely, as opposed to me standing in a room showing you a PowerPoint and talking through it. Because from an audio perspective, I know that was a concern that we talked about earlier. That's something that we really strive and pride ourselves on what we're able to deliver in an all-in-one soundbar. So,
perfect. All right, so I think we've kind of reached a good point here. If anybody has any questions, feel free to add them in the chat box here, and we'll try to address them. I think we've hit the couple that have come through kind of organically here. Everybody that's been in this meeting, you received the email from my email address. You have my personal email address. If you need anything, you want to follow up with any additional questions, feel free to reach out to me directly, and I can put you in the proper place. Or you can email our ProAV team at proav@dnh.com. We also have a ProAV landing site at dnh.com/ProAV, which kind of lists out all of our line cards and all the different contact information for all the various specialists that we have on the team. So feel free to utilize that resource as well. But I appreciate and thank you for your time. I mean, it looks like we'll wrap up here a little bit early, but I think we covered everything. And again, if you have anything, feel free to reach out to myself. I'd like to thank Brian for coming on and joining, as well as Kirsten. Appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.